Well, good evening and welcome to the LTAP After Hours. I'll be your host tonight. I'm Jennifer Sharkey, and with me I also have our asset management specialist, Mr. Pat Connor, who will lead us through the hot topic of wheel tax funding. So if you're not familiar, Indiana LTAP is the local technical assistance program. We're housed out of Purdue University. And really, to take away from this slide is to know that we are providing training, technical assistance, as well as technology transfer through different events and webinars such as tonight, but workshops, conferences, and we also host other programs like innovation, research, and beyond. And like I mentioned, our mission here is to assist local agencies, whether it's the street department, highway department, or local elected officials, to better meet the needs of your community by acting as a resource in that technology transfer. So you can see the 6 core pillars that we work through, which is training, research, innovation, safety, communications, as well as asset management. But we'll go ahead and get started on the focus topic for tonight, which is the wheel tax and excise surtax. We'll talk about what it is and why it's such a big, hot topic here today, as well as how it's implemented, distributed, and used within local agencies across Indiana, and how we estimate those revenues and how you can estimate those revenues for your community, whether you're a county, city, or town, and how this funding mechanism can impact other funding mechanisms that are available to local units. All right, so what is it and why are we talking about it now? Well, LOHUT is the local option highway user tax, and it's actually 2 separate taxes that a local unit must adopt concurrently. So that would be the wheel tax and the excise surtax. And these funds are designated for your local infrastructure network as it pertains to transportation like road and bridge funding. It actually passed the Indiana legislature in 1980 for county units to be able to enact this locally funded tax. But then in 2016, municipalities were able to implement LOHUT within their local units. And we've seen it was really unchanged since 1980 until most recently in 2014, 15, 16, 17, had a little gap, and then again in 2021 and 2023. So you can see the revisions that have been made over the course of time. Again, in 2016, at that time it was municipalities population 10,000 or greater, which then the next year was lowered. So any municipality that is 5,000 or greater in population are eligible to adopt a wheel tax and excise surtax. And then later in 2021 and 2023, there was some legislation that focused on those lighter trailers, so those that are 3,000 pounds or less. And at first it was allowed to have a permanent trailer plate but pay double the LOHUT fee, but then that was later repealed or actually sunsetted and expired. So now there is an exemption of trailers that are 3,000 pounds or lighter that have a permanent registration that would not need to pay the excise tax on the state level nor the excise surtax on the local level. But the reason we're talking about it here today is because in 2025, so this past General Assembly, LOHUT is required for any local units that want to take advantage of the local road and bridge matching grant lane mile distribution. So there's been a little bit of confusion on what this means as far as the lane mile distribution, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But really think of it, local road and bridge matching grant, that's community crossings. So the community crossings fund still has the matching grant component, so that CCMG that we're all familiar with. So it's the same grant program, there's no LOHUT requirement, local units can still apply to that as previous. But now there is a lane mile direct distribution component, which is a new funding opportunity available to local units who are eligible to adopt LOHUT. So that would be all 92 counties and then municipalities, population 5,000 or greater. So now I'll turn it over to Pat, who will discuss how this is implemented, used, and distributed.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. So as Jen said, I'll walk through some of the details on how to implement it, how it can be used, how it gets distributed, but also just want to clarify that we're talking about, not only are we talking about the wheel tax and the excise surtax, there is in the Indiana code, there is the county portion of that, and then also the municipal portion of that. And I would say ballparking, they're 90-95% similar and look exactly like one another. Throughout this rest of my part of the presentation here, as I talk about the implementation, distribution, and how it can be used, I will try to distinguish between the parts that are county only and the differences between the municipal ones as well. And also, I just want to also just echo some of Jen's thoughts there, in that, you know, we are a training provider here out of Purdue University, and our goal here today is to give all of you the information needed to make informed decisions. We're not here to try to lobby that you should have the wheel tax or excise surtax or not. I know there's a million reasons, maybe not a million, but a lot of reasons why you don't want to adopt the wheel tax and excise surtax. So it may sound like here we're giving all the benefits of that. We just want to get all that information to you in order for you to make the informed decisions that you need for your municipalities and counties as well. So LOHUT, like Jen said, it's actually two different taxes, the excise surtax and the wheel tax. They both must be adopted, amended, or rescinded together. They're like a married couple that can't get divorced. So it would be much simpler if the state statutes had them as one tax, but they're actually two different taxes that are married together. So just keep that in mind. Can't have one without the other. And so all 92 counties in Indiana are eligible to adopt the excise surtax and the wheel tax. But for the municipalities, the two requirements for the municipalities is you must have a population greater than 5,000 people, and you must also have a current transportation asset management plan. And I know for a lot of the towns and cities, as I collect those plans, I want to say there's 120 cities in the state of Indiana. We probably receive transportation asset management plans somewhere between 115 to 118 per year. So if you're one of those cities that may not turn it in every year, this may be something to keep in mind as you're thinking about adopting these taxes. And similar thing on the town side as well. So you'd have to maintain turning in that transportation asset management plan every year in order to keep eligible of having these taxes for your community. Just, you know, what the excise surtax is. That is an additional registration fee that you pay for your passenger cars, your trucks less than 11,000 pounds, the motorcycles, mopeds, and trailers less than 9,000 pounds. The wheel tax is the trucks greater than 11,000 pounds, trailers greater than 9,000 pounds, your semi-tractors, semi-trailers, the buses, recreational vehicles, your tow trucks, and all those vehicles. No vehicle here pays both taxes. You pay one or the other. So you either fall on the wheel tax side of it or on the excise surtax side of it. And that's the same for both municipality and counties as well. Now, some of the differences are on the rates. So the differences between the municipal statutes and the county statutes is on the rates and on what you can adopt. So on the county side, the minimum for the excise surtax, so again, this is your passenger vehicles, your pickup trucks, your mopeds, motorcycles. That minimum rate you would have to adopt would be at least $7.50, up to a maximum of $50 if you have a transportation asset management plan. If for some reason you didn't have a transportation asset management plan, that maximum would be $25. So for practicality, you have the range between $7.50 up to $50 per vehicle, per trailer, per moped or motorcycle. And then those rates can vary between those different vehicle classifications that I just mentioned. On the municipal side of the excise surtax, let me go back to the county. Sorry, try not to get cross paths here. The other option on the county excise surtax is you can either do the flat rate, $7.50 to $50, or you can do it based on a percentage base of the excise tax. And that range for the excise surtax is 2% up to 20% if you have the transportation asset management plan. That $7.50 minimum still holds true for the percentage side as well. And I'll show it later in a few slides. That minimum may be $2, but they would be required to at least pay that $7.50 minimum. On the municipal, getting back over now to the municipal, for the municipal folks, the cities and towns, they don't have that percentage-based option. That's probably the one big difference between the county wheel tax and excise surtax and the municipal one is that cities and towns don't have the option for the percentage-based method. Your rates that you would be allowed to adopt would be range between $7.50 to $25. And again, those rates may vary between different vehicle classes. On the wheel tax side, now, the buses, tow trucks, semi-tractors, semi-trailers, and those vehicles, they can range on the county side between $5 a minimum up to $80, which would be the maximum. And again, those rates can also vary between weight classifications, or you can have a different rate for your farm tractors, or your farm semi-trailers and your commercial semi-trailers. And then on the municipal wheel tax side, that range would be $5 to $40. So just again, the wheel one of the common questions that I get is, for my 18-wheeler, I have to pay that that $40 wheel tax 18 times. No, it's just a per registration, per vehicle fee that you would pay. It's not even though the name says wheel tax, it's not a per wheel fee. It's a per registration or vehicle fee. So an example of how those rates can change between vehicles. Here we have, a pickup truck weighing 13,000 pounds may have a wheel tax at $25 per registration, and then you can set that rate for a semi truck at $40 per registration or something like that. So they can vary between those different classifications. State statute also lays out a few exemptions that do not have to pay the wheel tax and excise surtax. This is right out of this Indiana code here: a vehicle owned by the state, a vehicle owned by the state agency, a vehicle owned by a political subdivision, school buses are all exempt, as well as your church buses are also exempt from this as well. And then also any funeral equipment or vehicles that are registered as funeral equipment are exempted. Now, I've had a few questions over the last few weeks and years for that matter is, well, can we exempt our farm vehicles out of these statutes? And the answer is, I don't believe so. You might need to check with your county attorney on that, but I think you would have to set those at, if that was an interest, at least the minimum rate, which would be the $5. So if it's not one of these types of vehicles, you have to pay at least the minimum. Something also to keep in mind is the effective date here. So whether you're thinking about adopting it, and the same dates hold true if you want to change it, increase the rates or decrease the rates or rescind them altogether, that deadline for them to go into effect that next calendar year is September 1st. So it actually says on or before August 31st. So in order because we pay our vehicle registrations, on a calendar year basis starting in January. So in order for those taxes to be implemented and to go in effect and start collecting in January, you need to have the ordinances passed before or on August 31st of this year for it to go in effect this coming January. If for some reason you adopt it after that, so it's between September 1st and December 31st, then you'd have to wait until that next calendar year in order for those ordinances to go into effect and start collecting fees on them. And those same date, if you want to raise the fee and for it to go in effect, the same dates hold true for that as well. Then, so let's say your city or town or county adopts the wheel tax and excise surtax. What do you do next? So by September 1st, you need to submit a copy of that ordinance to both the Bureau of Motor Vehicles and the Indiana Department of Revenue in order for those to go in effect. Now, if you're a municipality, you also, that requirement was to have a transportation asset management plan, which is your pavement asset management plan that you submit to us. So you need to submit that letter that says you have an approved transportation asset management plan as well. And if you're a county that wants to set that ordinance above that $25 or $40 max, you also have to submit a letter that you have an approved transportation asset management plan. So that's that. So you adopted it, you submitted the letters to the Department of Revenue and to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. What does it look like on the collection side? So this is how the state statute lays it out for the counties. On the city and town side, on the municipal wheel tax, it doesn't get into as much detail. It basically says that the Bureau is going to collect the fees, and then they will report it, remit it, and distribute it to the fiscal officer of your city or town. It doesn't really give dates or anything like that on there, but so just keep that in mind. I didn't create a new slide for that because it's pretty straightforward on what it does on how it is distributed there. But on the county side, so for the counties, the B&V, the taxes are paid at the time of registration to the B&V. So the B&V collects it. They keep 15 cents per transaction. That's the only money that doesn't come back to the county, is that 15 cents per transaction that the B&V takes to help administer the program. And then on the 21st day of the month, the B&V provides a report to the county treasurer and to the county auditor of those funds collected. Then also on the 21st of the month, the B&V remits the money to the county treasurer. So that's how it's collected. And then when it's allocated, the county auditor says no later than the 20th day of the month, the money shall be allocated among the local units of the local road, based on the local road and street formula. So a portion of that county wheel tax not only goes to the county, it also gets shared amongst the municipalities within the county. So it gets allocated, and then it says no later than the 25th day of each month, the county treasurer shall distribute those funds to the county and cities and towns based on that roadway formula. Now for the municipal wheel tax, forget about the county for a second. The municipal wheel tax, all that money that gets received goes straight to that municipality. But on the county side, just to reiterate, it gets shared amongst the county and the cities and towns. And here's how it gets shared between the cities and towns and the county and the counties. It all depends on your county population. So if your county population is greater than 50,000 people, it gets distributed 60% based on population and 40% based on mileage. So all that money gets prorated based on that weighting measure of population and mileage. So it gets, and then if the county is less than 50,000 people, it's 20% based on population and 80% based on mileage. And if you have questions and interested on these revenues, let us know. Here on this link here, go to www.purdue.edu/Indiana LTAP LOHUT. There we have a little report in there, and we've estimated what those minimums and maximums are for each city and town and each county. So you can get those revenue estimates from there based on the minimum and maximum. And if there's something in between there, let us know, and we can help also estimate those revenues from that as well. So how those funds can be used, right out of state statute here. A county, city, or town, and it's the same for the municipal and the counties. It says the county, city, or town may only use the surtax revenues or wheel tax revenues it receives to construct, reconstruct, repair, or maintain the streets and roads under its jurisdiction, or it can be used as the contribution for the Community Crossings Matching Grant Program. I know what a lot of counties are doing. Part of this is that they are taking so a county, I see it oftentimes, the county will put their wheel tax and excise surtax funds in its own fund, and then they withdraw out of that. But a lot of counties also will deposit their wheel tax and excise surtax funds into their NVH unrestricted account. So that may be helpful to a lot of counties. I know some counties have done that to help with the crunch of the NVH 50/50 and not, trying to have more money on the unrestricted side. They can put their wheel tax and excise surtax into that portion of that. And also, if you're expecting property tax and county general funds to go down, and if you're paying your county highway guys or your city street people out of your county or city general funds, and those funds may be going down, this may be a way also to not only offset that maybe lost revenue for your highway and street departments, but also then helps you make you eligible for that lane mile direct distribution. So just keep that in mind as well. The third bullet point on there, this is it's only on the wheel tax side. It says you can use it as a contribution to a multiple county infrastructure authority. I didn't get into the details of what a multi-county infrastructure authority is, but if you go to the Indiana Code, Chapter 36-7-23, it lays out in pretty good detail what that is and what they do. So I'm not sure if any of the counties online are part of a multiple county infrastructure authority, but if you are, you could also use that wheel tax portion for those uses as well. Here is a picture of the cities and towns and counties that have adopted the wheel tax and excise surtax since 1980. So far, about 55 counties have adopted it. And you can see the counties here in orange are the ones that have adopted it. And then also on the cities and towns side, about 16. I think there's a few other ones that we didn't pick up on here yet that I've heard that have also recently have adopted it as well. But just to give you a general idea of who's adopted it, if you're a county that is neighboring a county with it, here you could see and maybe reach out to them to see how it's going for them. So how those revenues are estimated, and like I mentioned, if you have questions on this, please let us know. We have the spreadsheets and the data from the Bureau of Motor Vehicle to help estimate these revenues. But what it takes is having that vehicle registration. Since it's a registration-based revenue, you have to know the number of vehicles, the number of mopeds, the number of motorcycles, the number of trucks, farm trucks, and all that. The registration information. And then you also need the mileage and population data for your county. So here's an example of DeKalb County. Jen just went up there recently and spoke to DeKalb County about the wheel tax, and so this is some of the data there. And you can see here on the excise surtax side, the number of passenger vehicles, the number of trucks, motorcycles, trailers, and so forth. They have 30,590 registration. And then if you take that by 15 cents, that's what those branch fees are. That's the portion that the B&V keeps to help collect those fees. And then based on the $7.50 minimum or the $50 maximum, we can estimate what those minimum maximums are, or we could put in any figure in between there that may help estimate those revenues as well. And then on the wheel tax side, here's the breakdown in different vehicle classifications there. We have our buses, our farm semi-tractors, farm trailers, farm trucks, and again, I've had a number of questions. Can we exempt those? No, but you could put those at the $5 minimum if that's what you would choose. But this is how the breakdown would look for DeKalb County, and just an example. And then you have, if you look down there, the $2.6 million on the maximum side for the excise surtax, and then you have the $583,000 based on the maximum for the wheel tax. We add those together, and then we look at DeKalb County and all the municipalities within DeKalb County based on their mileage and population. We can estimate what that portion that each city, town, or county would get. So for DeKalb County, there, I think something to keep in mind there, that middle column there, the percent allocation. DeKalb County would get about 73% of that revenue that is brought in, so about $2.3 million. And then it's broken down to Auburn, Garrett, Butler, Altona, and all the other cities and towns, prorated based on their mileage and population. And this is based on, also just want to throw in there, the 2023 Bureau Motor Vehicle data. Can we get the most recent data? We can, but it's not going to change a whole lot. We did these estimates back in 2017 as well, and they, the vehicle registrations are very dependent on population. So, if your population of your county is fairly stagnant, it's going to stay about the same. But if you're in a county that's seeing a lot of growth and a lot, population growth, of course, you're going to see more vehicle registrations, and so it may change a little bit based on that. And also, as I mentioned earlier, on the county side, you can adopt it based on the percent of the excise tax. So these are new slides that Jen and I added this year because we get a few questions on this, and I'll get into that in a second. So we added a few slides on there based on that. So here is the table, the excise surtax fee table out of the Indiana code. It's broken down based on vehicle value. It puts based on the vehicle value, puts it into a classification, and then based on age. So based on its classification and age, puts you in a certain category there. And then also on the bottom, trailers up to 9,000 pounds, their excise surtax fee schedule would be $8, mopeds $10, vehicles manufactured before 1981, so you're like, the older antique cars, $12. And then if we take that same table and same table there, and then if we look at, say, an example, if you adopted it based on 20%, the maximum rate, 20% maximum excise surtax rate, there you can see what that fee schedule would be. And a thing to highlight here, a common question or comment that I get when talking to a county about the wheel tax and excise surtax is, I hear, well, Joe down the road who's living off Social Security, barely getting by, we don't want to adopt it. No one wants to adopt a new tax, especially hurting the people just getting by, living on Social Security or whatever the case may be, and they pay the same fee as the medical doctor down the road or the business owner who just bought his third G-Wagon. Should they be paying the same amount? Well, there's two sides to that conversation. One side is, well, if that's the consensus of the county or city or town or county, you could adopt your rates based on the percent. So that older, lower value vehicle would pay the minimum, say in this case $7.50, and then the newer, higher value vehicles would pay more. So upwards of $212 if you look down there in that bottom left-hand corner to that table on the left. That would be the most. The least would be $7.50. But the other, kind of side to that coin is, well, each vehicle is, deteriorating the road the same. The county highway department is servicing each road the same. So everybody should pay the same. So depending on where your county's at, I'm not advocating one way or another, but we get that question on should everybody pay the same? Well, if you don't feel like that is the fair way, there is the percent-based way where it is based on vehicle value and age. And then here's what a sample vehicle registration. When you go and if you look at your registration, here's where a lot of that information you can look on your registration and look. This is actually Jen's example of her registration from Steuben County. She lives in Steuben County. But those yellow boxes, that information is used to determine the appropriate fee, the age, vehicle classification. So you can see up there in the left-hand corner, class 14, age 13, and then over there, weight 11,000 pounds. So that's how it helps put that vehicle in the right classification and age. And then those green cells that we have highlighted there, that's the county registration and the associated wheel tax or excise surtax fee for that county. So Steuben County, it has a 20% excise surtax fee. So she paid $18.17. She also lives within the city of Angola. They do not have a municipal wheel tax. So you can see that the blue boxes there is the municipal components on that vehicle registration. And then that last box in there, the orange one, is the state registration fees. And just wanted to highlight there, $15 in this example that she paid $45.35 in state registration fees. $15 is the state what is it called? The State Transportation Improvement Fee. So it's $15 of that goes into community crossings. So in one way, so you could say that the state enacted a statewide excise surtax as well. So everybody around the state, when you register your vehicle, it's $15 of that excise surtax, or that, not excise surtax, but state transportation improvement fee goes to the community crossings matching grant program. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jen to wrap things up and see how it impacts other funding mechanisms.
All right. Thank you, Pat. And as you know, my vehicle's a little bit older, so I'm on that lower end, which can also impact if you buy a new vehicle or not. But how does this impact other funding mechanisms? So we talked about it at the beginning of changes that have happened legislatively as it pertains to wheel tax and excise surtax. And most recently in House Enrolled Act 1461, which is now Public Law 173, it did have a requirement in there that any local unit, or I should say eligible local unit, that would like to access that lane mile direct distribution must have a wheel tax and excise surtax adopted. So again, the matching grant portion of community crossings, it's the same grant program, it's no LOHUT requirement, all local units are still eligible to apply as long as you meet the NDOT standards as far as the program goes. But there could be one change, and that would be instead of operating on a calendar year, so January through December for the different community crossing call for projects, it would actually switch to a state fiscal year, so a July through a June. And you'll see why later on as we look at the distributions from the local road and bridge matching grant, which that's what it's called in state law, but that's the funding mechanism that supports the community crossings program. So again, the matching grant is relatively unchanged, just some minor tweaks to it. But the biggest change would be this lane mile direct distribution. So that's the new funding opportunity that eligible units, which would be all counties, and then those municipalities that are population 5,000 or greater, are eligible for this direct distribution if you have a wheel tax and excise surtax, or what we call LOHUT, the local option highway user tax, if you have that adopted in your community. Now, one thing we've gotten a question on is, okay, the example of my registration, Steuben County has LOHUT. They have a wheel tax excise surtax. Does that mean Angola, who's a municipal unit within Steuben County, is eligible for this direct distribution because the county has a wheel tax? No. If you're an eligible municipality and you do not have LOHUT enacted, then you are not eligible for this direct distribution. So just wanted to get one of those common questions that we've had clarified. The other impact that this bill has is that if you are eligible and do receive the lane mile direct distribution, that does impact the amount that you could apply for from the Community Crossings Matching Grant Program. So an example here would be, let's say the Community Crossings Matching Grant, the max award is $1 million. So a local unit could apply for up to $1 million in Community Crossings Matching Grant funds. Now, if that same unit got a lane mile direct distribution of, let's say, $700,000, then what they could apply for in the matching grant program is that difference. So it would be the 1 million minus the 700,000. So they could only apply for up to $300,000. So we'll talk about that again here in a minute. But this is what it looks like fiscally over the next 4 years with some of these changes that have happened legislatively. So according to the Legislative Services Fiscal Impact Statement of House Enrolled Act 1461, it's estimated that there'll be just shy of $250 million in that fund for fiscal year 2026, which is the state fiscal year. So that would be July 1st, 2025, so we're just now in it, through June 30th of 2026. It's estimated that there'll be about $250 million in that local road and bridge matching grant fund, which is also sometimes called the Community Crossings Revenue Fund. So previously, 100% of these funds went to the Community Crossings Matching Grant Program. But now what will happen is the first $100 million that's available in these funds will go to Community Crossings Matching Grant Program for INDOT to administer that program. Then the next distribution from that fund will be for the railroad tax credit transfer. And so it's estimated that it could be up to $14.5 million, but it could fluctuate year to year, but that's the maximum amount estimated at this time. And then there's also a distribution to the State Highway Reconstruction Improvement Fund to support the local tracks program of current projects that are underfunded. So that would be a distribution there. And then the remaining for this first fiscal year will just carry over to the next fiscal year. So it's estimated that there'll be about $115 million left over in fiscal year 2026 that will carry over to 2027. So what that means for local units is that for this time period, there will be $100 million available for the Community Crossings Matching Grant Program, but there will not be a direct distribution based on lane miles available to local units. So keep that in mind for this state fiscal year. Now, as we enter the next fiscal year, so July 1st of 26 through June 30th of 27, we have the $115 million carryover, plus the estimated new revenue throughout that time period. So Legislative Services estimates there'll be around $375 million within that fund. That then the first $100 million goes to the Community Crossings Matching Grant Program. The up to $14.5 million transfer to the general fund for that railroad tax credit transfer, and then that $20 million again for the local tracks program. But starting in the state fiscal year 27, there's an additional $50 million that would go directly to Indianapolis if the city of Indianapolis can match those funds with new money. So we're not sure what that might look like, and we believe it's an all or nothing situation, so either it's the $50 million or zero, but I believe there's still some discussion happening as to that interpretation. But it's estimated in this time period that the lane mile direct distribution, what's remaining in this fund, would range from $190 million up to $255 million that would be available for the direct distribution. So what that looks like for local agencies from a funding perspective is that the $100 million would be available for the CCMG program. There's that estimated $190 million up to $255 million that could be available for lane mile direct distribution. And based on the language that's in the House Enrolled Act 1461, it's anticipated that these distributions would be made on June 30th of 2027. So the actual amount for what would be available for distribution varies, as well as how many units have adopted LOHUT, of which then the lane mile would be proportioned amongst those units. So right now it is fairly variable and a bit hard to estimate what that would look like for each community, because as more communities adopt wheel tax, excise, surtax, then that total lane mile would grow based on those eligible units. So then as we look at the next 2 years, fiscal year 2028, you see the estimated new revenue, all of those distributions, and then it looks like about $89 million up to $155 million could be available for direct distribution. So again, you'd have the $100 million CCMG program, the estimated $89 to $155 million for the direct distribution opportunity based on lane miles. Again, June 30th of 2028 is the anticipated date that those funds would be available. And what that means for your specific unit could vary from year to year based on the total amount available to distribute, as well as the number of eligible units that it would be distributed among. Now in fiscal year 2029, we do have a change. So the railroad tax credit falls off. That's no longer a disbursement or a transfer, if you will. So that's why you see the lane mile direct distribution is a bit higher, ranging from 124 million up to 174 million. So again, for this year, CCMG, lane mile direct distribution, again, looking at that June 30th, 2029 date, and potentially variability there if more units passing LOHUT that are then eligible for this new funding opportunity. So what it looks like over the course of those 4 years, you see what the total fund estimate is at the beginning of the state fiscal year, so that July 1st date, the first allocation of 100 million to the community crossings program, the next for the first 3 years, that transfer for the railroad tax credit, and then the 20 million each year, which actually is only for the first 5 years. So if we went out a few more years, you'd see that would drop off. And then of course the city of Indianapolis, what that might look like year to year for the eligibility of them having to match it at 50 million. And then the leftover funds there to be distributed based on lane miles could range from 90 million up to that 255 million across those 3 years. So again, it impacts the maximum grant award allowable for a local unit if a direct distribution based on lane miles is provided to that city, town, or county, which would impact the CCMG program availability. So again, Boiler County here, let's say they receives it would be 700,000 in lane mile direct distribution based on the example below. If the CCMG max award amount is 1.5 million as set by INDOT, then they could only apply for that 500,000 if they did receive that 1 million. Now the example in parentheses below shows different dollar figures if the max award, let's say, gets reduced to 1 million for CCMG, and if that direct distribution of lane miles is around 700,000, then Boiler County could apply for up to that 300,000. So you can see that difference, like as the max grant award is set by INDOT, and then that direct distribution of lane miles comes in, how that can impact those two funding opportunities. So with that, we'll do a quick summary here, and then we'll address any of the questions that have come through on the chat. And so we wanted to go through what we know for sure, and then also what we don't know at this time. So what we do know, as Pat said, LOHUT is comprised of those two taxes, the wheel tax and excise surtax. And they're married, can't get divorced. So if one passes, the other has to pass. If one gets rescinded, the other has to get rescinded. So it's a package deal. The wheel tax is a flat fee. So $5 minimum up to that $80 max for the county portion. And then the municipal portion, that $5 minimum up to the $40 max. And then on the excise surtax side, you have the flat fee, the minimum $7.50, regardless if it's a flat fee or percentage. And then up to that $50 max for the county side, $25 max for the municipal. And then you can see for counties only, there's the option of doing that percentage base, as Pat gave the example earlier. To qualify for the lane mile direct distribution, starting in that state fiscal year of 2027, your unit, if eligible, must adopt LOHUT. So I will say at this time, if your unit is not eligible to adopt LOHUT, so if you're below that population of 5,000, then you're also not eligible for lane mile direct distribution. So that opportunity is not available for you. It's only for those that are 5,000 and greater, or if you're a county unit. Again, summarizing that eligibility there. And then over the next 4 years, that lane mile direct distribution amounts currently estimated could range between 90 million and 255 million that would be dispersed amongst each unit that is eligible that fiscal year. So what we don't know are some of the mechanics of this. Which one when does a local unit need to adopt a wheel tax and excise surtax to be eligible for that lane mile direct distribution? So as Pat said, for it to start collecting, let's say in January of 2026, you must pass it by September 1st of 2025. So conservatively, we would say target August 31st of 2026 to start collecting to collect for January 2027 if that first disbursement is June 30th of 2027. However, I believe there's still discussion on, does it have to be collected? So does your unit have to actively be collecting LOHUT, that wheel tax, excise surtax, or is it just adopted? So some of those are still being addressed, I believe, with some of the state agencies responsible for administering these provisions. Another one is just confirmation if that legislation of that June 30th date beginning in 2027, if that's when those funds are actually going to be received or dispersed to local units, or if there's another administrative mechanism and timing that is being targeted. And depending on when that lane mile direct distribution is dispersed, when that would impact the CCMG award eligibility. So again, if we anticipate that the June 30th, 2027 date for the first iteration of that lane mile direct distribution is provided, then that could impact the fiscal year 2028 Community Crossings Matching Grant Program eligibility. But again, these nuances are being worked out amongst the state agencies, and we'll have guidance coming out once that's available. And as far as when, there's also the how question. How will they be dispersed? Is it a separate fund? Will it go into an MVH, as Pat described, how some communities receive their wheel tax and excise surtax either as a separate fund or within their MVH funds? Don't believe there's guidance as of yet to where these funds should be deposited at the local unit level, as well as that amount, as we talked, that variability from year to year. And the amount not only available to distribute amongst all the units, but what that unit individually would receive through this funding mechanism. So we'll go over some frequently asked questions. So one of the first ones that we've talked about a little bit already, but if the county has LOHUT in place, does that automatically qualify the municipalities in that county to be eligible for lane mile direct distribution? And no, each eligible unit must adopt their own LOHUT to qualify for that lane mile direct distribution funding opportunity. Another question we've gotten is, if the municipality adopts LOHUT, do they still receive those distributions from the county LOHUT? So you saw in Pat's portion, he broke it down on how the county LOHUT is shared amongst the cities and towns within the units. So currently, the law treats the county LOHUT and the municipal LOHUT separately. So for my example, I pay that Steuben County LOHUT. If Angola were to pass their own LOHUT, since they are eligible to do so, then I would pay, as a resident of Angola and Steuben County, both the Steuben County LOHUT and the Angola LOHUT. So currently it is stacked. So a person could pay both units, but would a vehicle ever pay both of those together? Then yes, because it does treat them separately. So it would be the county wheel tax surtax fee and the municipal wheel tax surtax fee. Both would be applicable to that resident or to me in that current situation. But would a vehicle pay both the wheel tax and the excise surtax? The answer is no, because as Pat explained, the wheel tax and the excise surtax apply to different types of vehicles. So no vehicle would pay both a wheel tax and excise surtax, but they could pay both a county and a municipal wheel tax or county and municipal excise surtax. So hopefully this has been informative for you. I'll invite Pat to join me again, and we will go through some of the questions that we have received on the chat.
And Kathy answered this one, but since the deadline is August 31st and TAMPs are due December 1st, will the 2024 TAMP be sufficient and considered current? And she said yes.
Yes, I would concur with what Kathy said.
You just want to reiterate it?
Yep. So we will look at the most recent asset management submittals in order for that eligibility if your municipality or county adopting the rates higher than the $40 and $25. So we'll look at the most recent asset management submittals.
Okay. Why hasn't there been more attention to the fact that citizens of cities and towns are paying a double tax?
So the question is, why hasn't there been attention for residents of cities and towns would need to pay double tax? So I will say, as we followed this legislation through this past session, there was discussion on that. There was an amendment to unstack that got passed in one part of the legislative process that was then removed later on in that process. So I'm certain there'll be more discussion in the future on that component.
If a town gets a distribution now, but won't be large enough to pass their own, will they continue to get a portion of the counties?
At this time, yes, the county will be sharing their LOHUT funds, whether it's wheel tax or excise surtax, with the municipal units, the city, towns, and county, or cities and towns within their jurisdiction. So whether the municipality passes their own LOHUT or not, they will continue to receive that distribution as the law is currently written.
If a municipality adopts LOHUT, will their distribution from the county LOHUT be decreased?
Not at this time. Until if they look at unstacking it next year, that might be part of possible language. But right now, no, it would not.
For eligible cities, towns can enact a wheel tax, surtax on their own, and if the county enacts one, cities and towns share from both. Yes.
Yes, yep. So cities and towns receive both at this time.
To be clear, towns less than 5,000 who is getting a portion of LOHUT now will no longer get a portion starting in 2027?
So no, if you are receiving a distribution from the county enacted LOHUT, you will continue to receive that distribution. If you're a local unit, so you're less than 5,000 population and you're not eligible to pass your own, you will continue to receive that into perpetuity or until the law changes, which, as you've seen, there hasn't been much change on that distribution side since it was enacted in 1980. A lot of the changes have been either some clarification on vehicle descriptions or some other opportunities for units to adopt their own. So as Pat was saying earlier, there's still that stacked mechanism for cities and towns 5,000 and greater that are eligible to enact their own, and those that are less than 5,000 that are not eligible to enact your own LOHUT, you would still receive LOHUT funds from the county enacted wheel tax, excise surtax.
And another one just came in. Did any rules change in the last 3 years that requires a county to distribute less funds to municipalities? And I think your answer is no.
Not to our knowledge, no.
No.
And then the last one is, does LTAP have an example ordinance for LOHUT?
Not currently, but we can certainly provide that resource. We do have examples from communities that have passed it on the county and municipal side. So if you'd like to reach out to Pat or myself, we'd be happy to assist.
That's all I have.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Pat for his hard work. Pat's the one that puts together those estimates. He crunches those numbers. He does an excellent job preparing for this presentation as well as preparing for individual presentation, and is a great resource And I'm happy to be here to assist with those efforts as well from a local perspective, where as a county engineer, when I was at Steuben County as the engineer, we actually went through this exercise and passed the LOHUT mechanism during my time there. So having both of those perspectives here at LTAP has been wonderful to provide this educational opportunity.
Yep. Thanks, Jen.
So with that, we'll go ahead and close out, and hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining us. Yep.